Welcome to Guts and Guns.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a single day on the calendar. For some people, it sparks, pride, heritage, that spirit of exploration.
Right, a sense of discovery.
But for others, that exact same day means centuries of suffering, violence, and just painful historical erasure. It's really a universe of conflicting feelings packed into one day.
It really is.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into Columbus Day. Our mission, really, is to get beyond the surface, explore the complex social, political, cultural forces behind its creation.
And its evolution, which is just as fascinating.
Exactly. How it became this national controversy, leading eventually to the rise of Indigenous Peoples Day. We're looking at articles, historical documents, proclamations, research.
A whole stack of material.
Yeah, trying to understand how celebrating one guy became this focal point for huge debates. Identity, immigration, how we remember our past or how we choose not to remember it.
And what's so illuminating, I think, is how commemorating a historical figure isn't always straightforward. It can be, a strategic tool.
Strategic? How so?
Well, it gets reshaped, repurposed across generations, to meet different needs, respond to different pressures in society. We're not just looking at what happened.
Right, but why it mattered.
Exactly, why it mattered so much to different groups at different times, and what that tells us about how the American story itself is always being sort of negotiated and rewritten.
Okay, so, like a lot of holidays, Columbus Day started small, really small. The earliest documented celebration we have is from 1792, New York City. Just a local thing marking the 300th anniversary of Columbus's arrival.
That's a local observance?
Yeah. And over the next 100 years or so, you see Italian and Catholic communities especially starting to embrace October 12th. It becomes their day, in a way.
Yeah, cultural marker for them.
But if you think this story is just about celebrating a voyage, think again. There's a major twist.
Okay.
Because the holiday's real surge, its push into national view, wasn't just about Columbus himself. It was really kicked off by the 1892 quadricentennial, the 400th anniversary.
1892.
President Benjamin Harrison, he issues this proclamation, July 21st, 1892. And he specifically names Friday, October 21st that year as a general holiday.
A specific date, a call to observe.
Yes, he urges people to, and I'm quoting here, cease from toil and devote themselves to such exercises as may best express honor to the discoverer and appreciate 4 completed centuries of American life.
So very grand language. Honor the discoverer, appreciate American life.
Very grand. And he goes further. He wants schools to be the center of the day's demonstration. He wants the flag, the American flag, to float over every schoolhouse to impress upon kids the patriotic duties of American citizenship. That's pretty straightforward, doesn't it?
It does sound very patriotic, very nation-building on the surface.
Yeah.
But that proclamation, it was actually a really significant shift.
How so?
Well, it strategically took what were just scattered, local, often ethnic celebrations.
Right, like the Italian and Catholic ones.
Exactly. And it transformed them into this moment of, almost enforced national reflection, a patriotic duty. If you look at the bigger picture, it shows how a leader can use history, use commemoration.
Definitely, you said.
Yeah, quite definitely. Not just to unify people, but to unify them around a very specific vision of what the nation is or what it should be. It's kind of like early public relations,
Wow. Okay. So after that big 1892 push, the movement for a permanent official holiday starts picking up steam.
Makes sense.
Colorado was the first state. They make it a statutory holiday in 1907. But getting it recognized federally, even with all that patriotic talk, that took decades longer.
Really? Decades?
Yeah. Congress first asked for yearly proclamations in 1934. Then FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, officially declared it a national holiday in 1937. But the final step, making it a fixed federal holiday.
When was that?
That wasn't until 1968. LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, signed the law making Columbus Day an official federal holiday, observed on the second Monday in October. And that only took effect in 1971.
Wow. Almost a century. From Harrison's big proclamation in 1892 to a permanent federal holiday in 1971.
Crazy, right?
That long, slow burn. It really suggests there were other things going on, forces at play that were maybe stronger or more complicated than just wanting to remember a voyage.
Exactly. What were the real reasons? The ulterior motives, maybe?
It definitely makes you ask that question.
And that, as you might guess, is where this story takes another really surprising, complex turn. Because making Columbus Day official wasn't just simple historical remembrance. Not at all.
Okay, I'm listening.
It was, in many ways, a direct response to some incredibly deep social and political pressures at the time.
Like what?
One of the biggest drivers, and this is pretty shocking, behind Harrison's 1892 proclamation was this horrific act of violence right here in the U.S., the New Orleans lynching.
The New Orleans lynching. I know about that. Terrible.
March 14th, 1891. A mob brutally murders 11 Italian immigrants. So just drags them out and kills them. It wasn't just an incident. It was the largest mass lynching in American history.
Unbelievable. And that connects to Columbus Day.
Directly.
Yeah.
It caused this massive diplomatic crisis with Italy. People were actually talking about war between the U.S. and Italy over this.
Wow. Okay. So Harrison's proclamation wasn't just about patriotism.
Not just. It's almost ironic, isn't it? A holiday about discovery rooted in this moment of national shame, of racist violence.
So the proclamation was what? Damage control?
It seems like it served as this critical maneuver, both diplomatically and domestically. By pushing the nation to celebrate Columbus, an Italian figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Harrison was trying to smooth things over with Italy.
Okay. That makes sense diplomatically.
But also at the same time, he was trying to promote some level of acceptance for Italian immigrants here who were facing just terrible discrimination, hardship, racism.
So it becomes a tool for assimilation.
Exactly. Reconciliation, maybe, but definitely assimilation. It fundamentally changed the holiday's meaning right from that moment.
Which explains why it became so important to Italian Americans themselves.
Absolutely. For them, it became this deeply potent symbol. Resilience, pride. It let them assert their legitimacy in a country that often treated them as outsiders, as other.
It was their claim to being American.
Right. Celebrating Columbus was like celebrating their coming to America, affirming the U.S. as a nation of immigrants, including them. It just reframes everything when you realize the holiday's big national push started not with a celebration of discovery, but with a response to this awful act of racist violence.
It really does. It's a much darker, more complex origin than most people realize.
And there was a key group pushing for this too, cementing Columbus's role, and therefore the Italian-American role, the Knights of Columbus.
Ah, yes, the fraternal organization, still very active today.
Founded in 1882, they're a Catholic group, and they specifically chose Columbus as their namesake. It was a deliberate move.
Why Columbus specifically?
To assert a place for Catholics and immigrants in what was, back then, a largely Protestant and often very anti-immigrant nativist America. Columbus gave them a figure connected to America's origins who was also Catholic.
So the name itself sent a message.
Exactly. It basically said, we Catholics, we immigrants, we're not aliens. We have a founding figure too.
Mm-hmm.
It was legitimizing for them.
That's fascinating. It shows how groups on the margins use symbols, use history to carve out space and demand acceptance, to create their own kind of patriotism.
And their lobbying was crucial in getting the holiday officially recognized later on. And it's worth remembering, a lot of those Columbus statues you see, they were often paid for by donations from working class, sometimes poor Italian Americans. It meant that much to them.
A symbol they literally invested in.
Yeah. Okay, so let's fast forward. Because that narrative, that carefully built image of Columbus the hero, the symbol of immigrant success, well, today it's under intense scrutiny.
That's putting it mildly.
Right. So this deep dive has to look at the two competing narratives that now clash over this one day on the calendar.
The two stories of Columbus Day.
Exactly. So first, you've got the traditional narrative. This is the one many of us learned. It paints Columbus as, this bold, daring explorer.
Driven by faith, courage.
Right. He discovered the Americas, supposedly.
Right.
Kicked off this world-changing occasion, brought two hemispheres together, laid the groundwork for a new civilization.
The classic textbook version, more or less.
And proponents of this view argue, look, the tragic stuff, the population decline among native peoples, mostly disease, unintended consequences, not deliberate violence.
And that you have to judge him by the standards of his time.
Exactly. Cruelty was common then, they argue, among Europeans, even among native groups. This view is still held strongly by many Italian-American groups, the Knights of Columbus, some historians.
And this narrative speaks to something powerful, doesn't it? That desire for a clear, heroic origin story.
Yeah, one that emphasizes exploration, progress, the European roots of American law and culture. It's a story of discovery that resonated for a long, long time. It felt like a proud beginning.
It's the established myth in many ways.
But then you have the counter-narrative, and it's a starkly different picture, often brutal.
This one starts by saying Columbus didn't discover anything.
Right. Millions of people were already here, living complex lives for thousands of years. This narrative points directly to Columbus's actions. initiating the transatlantic slave trade, his policies of forced labor, the violence.
Things documented at the time, even in his own writings.
Yes. His own journals show him ordering natives seized. He wrote they would be good servants. He shipped thousands of Taino people to Spain to be sold as slaves. Many died just on the voyage. He forced others into brutal gold mining plantation work.
Leading directly to the decimation of the Taino people.
Exactly. And you have eyewitnesses from his own time, like Bartolomé de las Casas, who wrote about mass slaughter, torture, and slavery. It wasn't hidden.
And critics argue these actions were seen as horrific even then.
They do, pointing out that the Spanish monarchs themselves eventually condemned what he was doing. His arrival wasn't a beginning of civilization for everyone. It was the start of European exploitation, colonization.
Setting the stage for things like the doctrine of discovery, manifest destiny.
Policies that led to the subjugation, the death, of countless Native Americans over centuries. So, for Indigenous peoples, Columbus Day isn't a celebration. It's remembering genocide and dispossession.
A day that, in their view, whitewashes history.
And contributes to their ongoing erasure from the national story.
So this isn't just scholars debating dates and facts, is it?
Not at all. It's a deep cultural, political struggle over the meaning of America itself. How do you reconcile that heroic myth with this incredibly dark historical reality?
The counter-narrative really forces us to confront colonialism's dark underbelly, as you put it earlier, and to see how these historical events still echo today. In institutions, in calls for social justice.
History isn't just in the past.
Never just in the past. It's always being reevaluated, especially through the eyes of those who were silenced before.
And this whole reassessment, this challenge to the traditional narrative, is exactly what led to the movement to replace Columbus Day altogether.
The rise of Indigenous Peoples Day.
Precisely. The idea wasn't new, actually. It first came up from Indigenous people themselves, way back in 1977, at a UN conference in Geneva.
What was the goal then?
To counteract anti-Indigenous discrimination and push back against that inaccurate narrative of discovery. They declared October 12th an International Day of Solidarity with the Indigenous Peoples of the Americas.
So international roots first?
Yeah. But in the U.S., it really gained traction around 1992. That was the quincentennial, the 500th anniversary. A big moment for reflection or confrontation.
1992 becomes key again.
And Berkeley, California, steps up. They become the first U.S. city to officially recognize Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day. It was a very deliberate statement.
An act of protest, really.
Yes, solidarity with Indigenous people and resistance to Columbus Day, as they put it. And it had roots in local activism, things like the Alcatraz occupation back in 1969. It wasn't out of nowhere.
That's interesting. If you compare 1992 to Harrison's 1892 proclamation.
Go on.
Well, 1892 was this top-down attempt by the president to shape national identity around Columbus. Then exactly 100 years later, 1992, you have this bottom-up movement driven by activists and marginalized groups, reshaping identity by demanding recognition for Indigenous people.
Wow, that's a powerful parallel. A century apart, using commemoration in totally different ways to define America.
It really highlights how these things evolve.
And we've actually seen a couple of different ways this change has happened since then, different models.
Okay.
South Dakota was actually the first state to make a change, even before Berkeley. In 1990, they replaced Columbus Day with Native American Day.
A statewide move early on.
Yeah, and it was part of this larger effort called the Year of Reconciliation, led by their governor at the time, George Mickelson. It was very collaborative, working with tribal leaders. The goal was healing, addressing bad relations, honoring the tribe's history.
So a reconciliation model.
Right. Then you have the Berkeley model from 1992. That was more city-level activism, resistance. Their resolution talked about expressing appreciation for our survival, acknowledging contributions, commemorating fallen patriots, more of a protest stance.
So state-led reconciliation versus city-level resistance and assertion. Two different paths to a similar outcome.
Both powerful, but coming from different places, different motivations.
That makes sense.
And the momentum has just kept building. By 2021, you had at least 14 states, plus D.C., and tons of cities officially adopting Indigenous Peoples Day.
And then didn't President Biden do something recently?
He did. In 2021, Joe Biden became the first U.S. president to officially recognize Indigenous Peoples Day with a formal proclamation. A huge symbolic step.
A big shift at the federal level, even if the holiday itself hasn't officially changed federally.
Exactly. But this shift, this growing recognition, hasn't been smooth sailing everywhere. There's been pushback.
From who mainly?
Particularly from some in the Italian-American community. They feel that their holiday which for them was about honoring their struggles, their contributions, is being erased or attacked.
That original meaning we talked about is getting lost for them.
Right. There was this situation in Parsippany, New Jersey recently. Big community protests. The school board ended up removing all holiday names from the school calendar, not just renaming Columbus Day, but getting rid of everything because it was so contentious.
Wow, that shows how raw these feelings still are.
Definitely. It highlights this really difficult tension, doesn't it?
What tension specifically?
Well, what started as a tool for one marginalized group, Italian Americans, to gain acceptance,
Using Columbus as their symbol?
now clashes directly with the need of another, even more historically oppressed group, Indigenous Peoples, to have their history, their survival, acknowledged.
It's like, whose history gets the spotlight? Whose pain gets acknowledged on that day?
Exactly. In a diverse society like ours, how do we decide? Whose story gets celebrated? Whose gets erased, even unintentionally? It's a tough question.
A really tough question with no easy answers.
So let's try to bring this all together. What our deep dive really shows is that Columbus Day's origins, far more tangled, far more political than the simple storybook version.
Definitely not just about a boat trip.
No. It emerged as this strategic response, really, to intense anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic feeling. It was a political tool used to help legitimize Italian Americans carve out their place in the country.
And looking at the bigger picture now, the way the holiday has evolved or is being evolved tells us so much about shifts in American consciousness.
How we see our own history.
Right. The reevaluation of Columbus, pushed hard by Indigenous voices, activists, scholars. It's forced a confrontation with that dark underbelly we mentioned, colonialism, violence, disease. The stuff his voyages kicked off.
It's uncomfortable history.
Deeply uncomfortable. And this movement for Indigenous Peoples Day, it's not just about changing a name on a calendar. It's really a public negotiation of American identity.
A reckoning.
A reckoning, exactly, with the history of oppression. It's this collective struggle to fit together the heroic discovery story with the brutal reality of colonization and understand how that past still shapes the present.
Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to mull over.
Okay.
That South Dakota Year of Reconciliation back in 1990, it offers one possible model, right? Collaboration, aiming for healing, leading to a more inclusive way to mark the day.
A potentially constructive path through the conflict.
So what does our whole deep dive today suggest about how we, as a society, make these choices? Which histories do we celebrate? Which do we acknowledge? Which do we maybe even need to mourn? And what do those choices say about who we think we are collectively moving forward?
And maybe, how might other historical commemorations, other holidays with maybe equally complex or hidden origins evolve as we keep grappling with our messy, complicated past?
Lots to think about there.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Tune in again.